as we said earlier, here at a state park, the ethos is maybe a little bit different than on a traditional golf course, where you still want to have that feel that it's a park that people can enjoy and appreciate the natural world in a little bit different way. You have a couple of folks involved, Andy, in monitoring the wildlife, and of course these houses are an example of that. Talk a little bit about how much staff you have involved in it, and the kinds of things that they do out here. And then Victor mentioned the habitat stuff, so that would be a nice part two to this. So let's do a little bit about what's going on wildlife-wise out here.
So Bethpage State Park is a near 1,500-acre park, so we have 5 golf courses, what were our main businesses. We also have a picnic area and hiking trails, biking trails, etc. So with the scale of the operation we have, and Frank's mentioned the ethos of state parks, we have an ecologist on board. We have Victor is our head horticulturalist. We have an assistant horticulturalist. We also have a semi-retired raptor specialist. So this time of year, he'll let us know that we have on the 7th hole of the black course right now, we have an owl chick in there, and on the blue course we also have another owl nest. And after the great horned owls go through their cycle, then we have the red-tailed hawk cycle. And then we also have our ecologist has several volunteer birders come by, and they'll monitor all birdhouses. So we have a few dozen birdhouses throughout all 5 golf courses for eastern bluebirds, tree swallows, and monitoring for any invasive birds too. So that's part of that.
Yeah.
And then our ecologist will communicate with Victor, and they'll try to put the birdhouses in the best spot for success.
Yeah. So it's interesting because people are like, well, why keep track of the birds? Birds are harbingers. They tell us the health of the ecosystem in some ways, right? Like bees, birds and bees, right? These are things that we don't really pay attention to, but when they're not functioning properly, it has a ripple effect eventually on our own well-being. So having these habitats, especially in these urban areas, and seeing that cycle is really important. Now, they don't just happen here, right? You have to be intentional about it.
Correct, yes. And we're also, the other part of that is golf courses in general. Part of the reason we're all here is our reputation might not be so as wholesome as we would like.
That's right.
Now we have evidence of things we're doing. So if people are asking, wow, I hear this about golf courses in a negative light, we have contrary reports to the positive. Yeah. And look, part of it is finding the evidence out for ourselves. Are we as bad as people tell us we are? And if we can find out that, wait a second, we have birds, we have bees, we have pollinators, we must be doing something right.
Yeah.
There's evidence point, so a reasonable person would say, all right, we're providing public recreation, we're being judicious and smart with how we're managing the land.
Yeah, and part of that, to make it habitable, is the planting. So you talked a little bit about that. Can you talk a little bit more about intentionally planting for wildlife? You were talking earlier, they don't even like walking through this stuff.
Well, that's for mammals, but the birds themselves, they're insect eaters. So short grass is not conducive to produce insects. These tall grasses will get more insects. So that's why when you see the bird nest boxes, they're put in these naturalized areas with the tall grasses and stuff. That makes a good habitat for a bluebird or a swallow. We've had success since 2002 with bluebirds. Before that, we haven't had bluebirds in, before that, no one could recall the last time we had bluebirds.
So let me set you up a little bit for something that might be hard to see with where we can walk. But when you think about pollinators and birds, you're looking at species that are foraging in the environment, right? They're foraging around. And they don't really like when it's only good for a little while in some place. One of the things I think must be your goal is to have the diversity, Victor, that gives you that year-long food foraging supply. Can you talk about the diversity that you've been able to get or others could contribute to creating on their courses?
Right, so we have these particular gardens, and in these gardens I grow about 80 to 100 different types of native perennials. But these perennials flower throughout the season. Not each particular one. Each perennial might only flower for two weeks, so you need a variety of different perennials. In these garden areas, we found more wildlife, such as hummingbirds, different types of honeybees, different types of bees, butterflies, and stuff like that. Different mammals as well. to get them established on the golf course is a challenge due to the maintenance practice.
Right.
So that's why we had to decide on putting these plants in particular garden areas that were protected.
Oh, out of play.
Out of play, correct.
But you, as Andy said, you know, you got 1,500 acres out here, and so you have a lot of area where there isn't anything, and you don't fuss around too much in these areas.
Not in these areas, and so say like we put the bird houses close to a green surround, not particularly, but this is really, you know, unless you're way off course, there's not too many golfers over here. So
Yeah.
keep a good track. And the biodiversity, Victor mentioned mammals. You know, we keep track of these things, and sometimes you have a coincidental year, like we might have a year where we have a lot of foxes, and then other years where we have a population drop. And now we're seeing a lot more woodchucks around lately.
Huh.
We were seeing deer a few years. Now we've seen a coyote on property once or twice. And we haven't seen deer anymore. So
Okay.
there's like an ebb and flow to some of these populations.
Well, you know, 1,500 acres in the middle of what's pretty well developed around it. So this is a haven, I would imagine, for a lot of species that wander around. No bear yet. No bear? No bear yet.
Migratory birds, that's another good thing about having.
Well, and Long Island is a great flyway. Is all part of the North American flyway for sure.